The morning of December 18th, 1944, Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper stood beside his Tiger tank 3 kilometers east of Stavelot, Belgium, watching American trucks disappear west toward Spa. His Kampfgruppe had traveled 120 kilometers in 36 hours. The same advance in 1940 took 9 hours. Now his fuel gauges read empty. His radio operator had just confirmed that American engineers were evacuating a massive fuel depot 8 kilometers ahead. 3 million gallons, enough gasoline to push his entire SS Panzer division to the Meuse River and beyond, to Antwerp. Peiper knew the mathematics. His Tigers and Panthers burned 180 gallons per 100 kilometers in combat conditions. His Kampfgruppe had 147 armored vehicles. Simple calculation. If he captured that depot intact, the German offensive succeeds. If the Americans destroy it first, his attack dies here. The Americans were destroying it. Black smoke already rose above the tree line. Peiper had fought Americans before. Tunisia. He knew their Sherman tanks, adequate armor, adequate guns, nothing his Tigers couldn't handle in direct combat. He had destroyed dozens of them. But standing there watching that smoke, watching those trucks, Peiper understood something more fundamental. The Americans weren't winning this war with better tanks. They were winning it with trucks, with depots, with logistics systems that could move 3 million gallons of fuel to a forward area, then evacuate it in hours when threatened. Germany had nothing comparable. Not anymore. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. This realization about American logistics wasn't unique to Peiper. It appeared throughout German accounts of fighting the Western Allies from 1944 through 1945. Otto Carius, one of Germany's most successful tank commanders, wrote about it. Hans von Luck, a Panzer Division commander under Rommel, documented it. German after-action reports analyzed it. German prisoners of war confirmed it in interrogations. The pattern was consistent and striking. When German soldiers discussed what weapon they feared most, the answer wasn't American tanks or American aircraft. It was American logistics, the endless replacement system, the supply abundance, the maintenance capacity that put destroyed tanks back into service faster than Germans could knock them out. This fear was rational. It was based on direct observation of material reality that contradicted everything German military doctrine assumed about warfare. German doctrine, since the 1870s, emphasized quality over quantity, tactical superiority over material advantage, the decisive battle over the sustained campaign. These principles had worked. Prussia defeated Austria in 1866. Prussia defeated France in 1870. Germany nearly won in 1914 through 1918. Germany crushed Poland, France, Yugoslavia, and Greece in weeks during 1939 through 1941. The system appeared validated, but the system had a hidden assumption. Wars must be short. Germany lacked the industrial base and raw materials for sustained conflict. German military planning compensated by emphasizing speed and decisiveness. Strike fast, win quickly, end the war before logistics become decisive. This worked when enemies were unprepared or logistically weak. It failed catastrophically against an enemy with overwhelming industrial capacity who understood logistics as warfare's foundation. The United States understood this. American military planning from 1941 onward emphasized logistics above all else, not because American planners were smarter, but because American industrial reality demanded it. The United States produced more steel, more oil, more vehicles, more of everything than any nation in history. American strategic thinking adapted to leverage this advantage. Build logistics systems that could sustain armies across oceans, design equipment for mass production and field maintainability, create replacement systems that treated soldiers and machines as renewable resources, train crews faster than combat consumed them. The approach seemed mechanical, even inhuman to German observers, but it was devastatingly effective. The numbers were staggering. In 1944, American factories produced over 17,400 Sherman tanks. Germany produced 6,000 tanks total, all types. American factories built over 96,000 trucks in 1944. Germany built less than 30,000, and most were captured French or Czech vehicles. American oil production in 1944 exceeded 4.6 million barrels daily. Germany's synthetic fuel plants, constantly bombed, produced perhaps 30,000 barrels on good days. The disparity wasn't close. It was overwhelming, and every German soldier saw the consequences. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union in June 1941, the Wehrmacht fielded roughly 3,000 tanks supported by approximately 600,000 trucks and over 600,000 horses. Horses in a mechanized war. The German army in 1941 relied more heavily on horse-drawn transport than the Kaiser's army in 1918. This wasn't tactical choice. It was industrial necessity. Germany lacked petroleum and industrial capacity to fully motorize. German planners compensated by concentrating mechanized forces in elite panzer divisions while leaving infantry divisions dependent on horses and foot movement. This created tactical flexibility for the armor, but enormous logistical vulnerability for the force as a whole. The panzer divisions moved fast, infantry divisions moved slowly. Supply lines stretched. Fuel consumption exceeded predictions. By August 1941, just 8 weeks into Barbarossa, German forces approaching Smolensk were consuming more fuel than supply columns could deliver. Panzer commanders halted their advance, waiting for infantry to catch up, waiting for supplies. The delay gave Soviets time to establish new defensive lines. When German armor resumed attacks, Soviet resistance had stiffened. The pattern repeated throughout autumn 1941. Rapid advances, extended supply lines, fuel shortages, delays, Soviet recoveries. By December, German forces were 100 kilometers from Moscow, but could advance no further. Not because Red Army stopped them, because logistics stopped them. Fuel couldn't reach frontline units in sufficient quantities, ammunition stocks ran low, winter clothing never arrived. The offensive stalled. German logistics worked adequately for short campaigns in Poland and France where distances were manageable and captured supplies augmented German stocks. Barbarossa exposed the system's fundamental limitations. Russia was vast, roads were poor, distances exceeded German logistical capacity. The Wehrmacht needed to capture Soviet fuel stocks to sustain operations, but Soviets destroyed their own supplies. During retreats, German units repeatedly encountered empty fuel depots, burned warehouses, demolished rail lines. The Red Army applied a scorched earth policy that denied Germans captured resources. German supply officers scrambled to maintain deliveries over ever-lengthening supply routes with insufficient vehicles and degrading road conditions. Contrast this with American logistics. When American forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, the logistics plan was already in place. SHAF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, had spent 2 years designing supply systems. The plan called for artificial harbors to offload cargo until major ports could be captured. It included a trucking system, later called the Red Ball Express, to move supplies from Normandy beaches to advancing armies. It established depot systems, maintenance facilities, replacement pools, everything needed to sustain operations indefinitely. American planners assumed long campaigns. They designed systems capable of supporting armies across hundreds of kilometers for months or years if necessary. Equipment was standardized for easy maintenance. Spare parts were stockpiled in enormous quantities. Replacement troops trained continuously in the United States, ready to flow into units as casualties occurred. The scale was unprecedented. By September 1944, Red Ball Express was operating over 5,000 trucks continuously, moving over 12,000 tons of supplies daily. Drivers operated in shifts, keeping trucks rolling 24 hours. Maintenance crews accompanied convoys. Refueling points were established every 80 kilometers. The system consumed enormous fuel, transporting fuel forward. American planners accepted this inefficiency because fuel was abundant and trucks were replaceable. Germany had neither luxury. When American armies advanced across France in August 1944, they outran their supply lines. Patton's Third Army reached the Meuse River in early September, then stopped, not because of German resistance, because fuel couldn't reach forward units fast enough. Patton complained bitterly. He believed he could have reached the Rhine River and perhaps ended the war in 1944 if supplies had been adequate. He was probably wrong strategically, but correct about the supplies. American logistics was stretched to absolute limits by September. Yet, even stretched, even operating at maximum strain with supply lines extending over 800 kilometers from Normandy, American logistics still exceeded anything Germany could field. German observers noted this repeatedly. Colonel Hans von Luck commanded the 21st Panzer Division in Normandy. He fought American forces from July through August 1944. In his post-war memoir, Luck described encountering destroyed American positions. What struck him wasn't the combat damage, it was the amount of abandoned equipment. Americans retreating under pressure left behind trucks, ammunition, supplies, sometimes even serviceable tanks. They simply abandoned them because replacements were available. No German unit could afford such waste. Every vehicle was precious. Every tank was irreplaceable. Americans treated equipment as expendable. Luck also described capturing American supply dumps. The abundance shocked him. Warehouses full of food, cigarettes, fuel, spare parts, luxuries. German soldiers hadn't seen in years. American frontline troops received rations that exceeded what German officers ate. Coffee, chocolate, canned meat, fresh bread. American soldiers complained about their rations. German soldiers would have considered them feast. The material disparity wasn't subtle. It was overwhelming and visible in every encounter. Otto Carriers wrote about similar experiences fighting Americans in the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945. Carriers commanded a company of Tiger tank destroyers, the heaviest armored vehicles Germany produced. His unit needed vehicles. German half-tracks were destroyed or immobilized. Carriers decided to capture American vehicles as replacements. This wasn't unusual. German units throughout the war used captured equipment when German supplies weren't available. What Carriers found remarkable was how easy the capture was. American positions contained multiple vehicles, often with fuel in tanks and keys in ignitions. His unit simply drove American jeeps and trucks out of captured positions. In Carriers's account, he notes, almost casually, that his men preferred American vehicles. They were more reliable than German equivalents, easier to maintain, and fuel was available from captured American dumps. This casual preference reveals something profound. By April 1945, German soldiers facing Americans had stopped thinking of themselves as fighting a peer opponent. They were scavenging from a materially superior force. The psychological shift was enormous. German military culture emphasized superiority. German soldiers were trained to believe in their tactical and equipment advantages. This belief sustained morale through difficult campaigns. But facing Americans in 1944 and 45, that belief collapsed under material evidence. German tanks might be individually superior. German tactics might be more sophisticated. But Americans had more tanks, more trucks, more fuel, more everything, and they could replace losses faster than Germans could inflict them. The replacement system was especially demoralizing. When a German Panzer division lost 50 tanks in combat, those 50 tanks were gone. Replacement tanks might arrive eventually, maybe weeks or months later, probably not enough to restore full strength. Crews could be replaced faster than vehicles, so divisions often had trained crews waiting for tanks that never came. American armored divisions lost 50 tanks and received 50 replacements within days. sometimes within hours. Field maintenance companies could repair battle-damaged Shermans overnight and return them to service. More severely damaged tanks were evacuated to depot-level maintenance facilities that had equipment and parts to rebuild them completely. The entire system was designed for sustained operations with continuous losses and continuous replacements. German intelligence officers analyzed this system and understood its implications. A captured German report from September 1944 assessed American logistics capacity. The report concluded that American forces could sustain offensive operations indefinitely, regardless of losses. Ammunition expenditure that would cripple a German division for weeks barely slowed American units. Artillery battalions that would exhaust German stocks in days of heavy fire could maintain that fire rate for months because American logistics kept shells flowing forward continuously. The report recommended that German forces avoid attritional engagements with Americans. Germany would lose any battle that became a test of logistics, but Germany couldn't avoid those battles. By autumn 1944, Germany was fighting defensively on all fronts. Defensive warfare is inherently attritional. It trades space for time, casualties for delay. Germany needed time to produce new weapons, train new soldiers, somehow change the strategic situation. But time required sustaining armies under continuous pressure, and sustaining armies required logistics Germany didn't possess. Hitler understood this. His solution was Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge. The plan was Germany's last strategic gamble. Concentrate remaining panzer forces, achieve surprise, drive to Antwerp, split Allied armies, force a political settlement. The plan required speed. German forces needed to reach Antwerp before Allies could react, and the plan required fuel. Lots of fuel. More fuel than Germany could provide. German quartermasters calculated fuel requirements. The offensive needed approximately 5 million gallons for the initial attack. Synthetic fuel production could provide perhaps half that amount. The remainder would have to come from captured American stocks. The plan explicitly assumed German panzer divisions would overrun American fuel depots during their advance and use American gasoline to sustain their push to Antwerp. And this wasn't tactical opportunism. It was operational necessity. Without captured American fuel, the offensive would stall within days. German officers recognized the risk. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, overall commander for the offensive, told subordinates the plan was fantasy. Even if everything worked perfectly, even if surprise was complete, even if American resistance collapsed, German forces lacked the fuel to reach Antwerp. The mathematics were clear. Von Rundstedt was overruled. Hitler ordered the attack. German units began moving into assembly areas in early December. The offensive launched December 16th, 1944, before dawn. German artillery preparation lasted 90 minutes. Then infantry and armor advanced through American lines. Surprise was complete. American units in the Ardennes were understrength, newly arrived, or exhausted veteran divisions, resting. They weren't prepared for major attack. German forces achieved rapid initial gains. Some American units broke, others fought delaying actions, then withdrew. By evening, December 16th, German spearheads had penetrated 15 kilometers into American positions. Kampfgruppe Peiper led the northern thrust. Peiper commanded approximately 5,000 men, 147 armored vehicles, SS battle group assigned to capture bridges across the Meuse River. His route ran through Ligneville, Stavelot, Trois Ponts, to the river. The plan gave him 48 hours to reach the Meuse. Speed was everything. Delay meant failure. Peiper's force moved forward December 17th, encountering light resistance, destroying scattered American units. Progress was slower than planned. Roads were narrow, traffic jams formed. Belgian terrain, as one German officer noted, was suitable for bicycles, not panzers. But Peiper kept pushing. By evening, December 17th, his lead elements reached Ligneville. They captured an American field hospital and executed prisoners, a war crime documented by American investigators afterward. December 18th, Peiper attacked Stavelot. The town controlled a bridge across the Meuse River. Beyond Stavelot, German intelligence reported, were massive American fuel depots, over 3 million gallons. Peiper knew he needed that fuel. His tanks were already running low. The fuel Germany had provided wouldn't reach Antwerp. Those American dumps were essential, but the Americans were evacuating them. American logistics officers had recognized the threat. Trucks were moving fuel west, away from German advance. What couldn't be evacuated was being destroyed. Engineers prepared demolitions. Thousands of gallons were set ablaze. Peiper's forces could see the smoke. Peiper attacked Stavelot before dawn. December 18th. Initial assault failed. American defenders held the town. German infantry took casualties. Peiper committed more forces. By mid-morning, German armor entered Stavelot. American engineers detonated prepared charges, destroying part of a fuel depot as German tanks approached. Peiper captured some fuel, perhaps 20,000 gallons, a tiny fraction of what had been stored there. The rest was gone, evacuated or burned. This pattern repeated throughout the offensive. German units advanced. American logistics units withdrew, taking supplies or destroying them. What Germans captured was never enough. Traffic jams behind German lines prevented fuel trucks from reaching forward units. Even captured American fuel couldn't be distributed effectively because German logistics couldn't match American distribution systems. By December 20th, Peiper's Kampfgruppe had reached La Glaise, approximately 40 kilometers from its starting point. The Meuse River was still 60 kilometers away. Peiper's fuel gauges read empty. His Tigers and Panthers sat immobilized, not from combat damage, but from fuel starvation. American forces were counterattacking from multiple directions. Peiper radioed for supplies. None came. German supply columns were stuck in massive traffic jams stretching back to Germany. The roads couldn't handle the volume. Horse-drawn artillery mixed with motorized units, creating bottlenecks that lasted hours. Fuel trucks couldn't reach the front. December 24th, Christmas Eve, Peiper received orders to withdraw. Impossible. His vehicles had no fuel to move. He ordered his men to destroy their remaining tanks and equipment, abandon everything, retreat on foot through American lines. Of 147 armored vehicles that started the offensive, Peiper brought back 0. All were destroyed or abandoned, not because American tanks defeated them, because fuel defeated them. The most powerful panzer battle group Germany could assemble in late 1944 died from logistics failure. This was the fundamental German problem. The Ardennes offensive demonstrated it perfectly. German tactical execution was excellent. Surprise was achieved. Initial breakthroughs succeeded. German soldiers fought with skill and determination, but logistics doomed the operation from the start. Germany gambled that captured American supplies would sustain the offensive. The gamble failed. Americans evacuated or destroyed their dumps faster than the Germans could capture them. And even when Germans seized supplies, their distribution system couldn't move them forward effectively. American logistics worked differently. When the Ardennes offensive began, American supply officers reacted immediately. Within hours, orders went out to evacuate forward dumps. Truck companies mobilized, drivers, many of them African-American soldiers in segregated transportation units, drove through the night to move supplies west. They operated under threat of German capture, sometimes with German units only kilometers away. But they evacuated the supplies. Thousands of tons of fuel, ammunition, food, equipment moved west in 72 hours. Simultaneously, American logistics began flowing reinforcements forward. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were pulled from rest areas, loaded onto trucks, driven to Belgium. The divisions arrived within 48 hours and deployed directly into defensive positions at critical road junctions. Patton's Third Army, fighting 150 kilometers south near Metz, received orders to disengage, turn north, and counterattack into the German flank. Patton accomplished this in under 4 days, an operational maneuver requiring moving over 200,000 men and thousands of vehicles across difficult terrain in winter. German staff officers considered it impossible. Patton did it because American logistics could support it. By December 23rd, American forces defending Bastogne were surrounded but supplied by air. C-47 transport aircraft dropped food, ammunition, medical supplies directly into the perimeter. The airlift sustained the garrison for days until Patton's counterattack broke through. German forces surrounding Bastogne couldn't replicate this. The Luftwaffe lacked sufficient transport aircraft. German logistics couldn't supply forward units over extended lines in winter. American logistics could. The difference was decisive. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The psychological impact on German soldiers was profound. Every engagement reinforced the same lesson. Material advantage matters. Germans might win tactical battles, but Americans won the logistical war. And logistics determined strategic outcomes. When German units knocked out American tanks, replacements arrived within days. When German tanks were destroyed, replacements never came. When American artillery expended thousands of rounds, more shells arrived tomorrow. When German artillery fired heavily, ammunition rationing followed. The disparity was constant and demoralizing. German prisoners of war confirmed this in interrogations. American intelligence officers conducting interviews in early 1945 compiled reports on German morale and attitudes. The reports showed consistent patterns. German soldiers respected American firepower, especially artillery. They feared American air superiority. But what demoralized them most was the sense of fighting an enemy with unlimited resources. One captured panzer crewman told interrogators that destroying American tanks felt pointless. You could knock out 5 Shermans and 10 more appeared the next day, kill the crews and fresh crews arrived from replacement depots, destroy the supporting infantry and more infantry came forward. There was no end to it. Germany couldn't match that system. Every German soldier knew it. This knowledge undermined morale differently than combat defeat. Combat defeat could be rationalized. Bad luck, tactical mistakes, overwhelming local force. Soldiers could believe the next battle might go differently. But logistics failure couldn't be rationalized. It was mathematical, calculable, inevitable. Germany had X amount of fuel, Y number of tanks, Z production capacity. America had 10 times X, 20 times Y, 50 times Z. No amount of courage or tactical skill could overcome that disparity in sustained conflict. Senior German officers understood this earlier than frontline soldiers. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel wrote about it extensively after fighting Americans in North Africa. Rommel's Afrika Korps had defeated British forces repeatedly from 1941 through early 1943 through superior tactics and aggressive maneuver. But American forces arriving in late 1942 presented different challenges. Not because American soldiers were better trained, they weren't. Initially, not because American equipment was superior. Early Shermans were roughly equivalent to German Mark IVs. The challenge was American logistics. Rommel documented this in his papers and post-battle reports. After the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, Rommel assessed American capabilities. His report noted that American tactical performance improved rapidly, faster than British forces had learned. But the real threat was American logistics. American forces in Tunisia were supplied across the Atlantic Ocean, through Mediterranean waters, onto North African shores, then forward to combat units. Despite this enormous distance and complexity, American logistics maintained supply flow continuously. Rommel's forces, fighting closer to Italian and Axis supply bases, received irregular deliveries, constantly threatened by Allied naval and air interdiction. The comparison was stark. Rommel predicted that American logistics would eventually decide the war. Not immediately. In early 1943, American forces were still building their systems, learning their trade. But Rommel recognized the trend. American industrial capacity was overwhelming. American logistics systems were designed for sustained global warfare. Once Americans established their supply lines and trained their forces, they would be unstoppable. Not because of tactical brilliance, but because of material superiority properly employed. German high command ignored Rommel's warnings. Hitler and his staff believed German tactical superiority would compensate for material disadvantages. This belief persisted despite mounting evidence to the contrary. By mid-1944, evidence was overwhelming. Germany faced enemies on three fronts. In the east, Soviet forces advanced continuously, supported by enormous artillery concentrations and mass tank formations. Many Soviet weapons were American-made, delivered through Lend-Lease. Over 400,000 trucks, 13,000 tanks, enormous quantities of food, aviation fuel, aluminum, copper, steel. American logistics supplied not only American forces, but Allied forces globally. In Italy, Allied forces ground slowly northward against determined German resistance. The campaign was attritional. Germans traded space for time, conducting fighting withdrawals from prepared positions. But even fighting defensively, German units consumed supplies faster than logistics could replace them. Ammunition stocks dwindled, fuel became scarce, replacement troops and equipment arrived in insufficient quantities. American and British forces, despite fighting over difficult mountainous terrain with extended supply lines, maintained their logistics. They could sustain operations indefinitely. In France, after Normandy, German armies collapsed, not from single decisive defeat, but from cumulative logistics failure. German panzer divisions in Normandy fought effectively through July and early August. They inflicted heavy casualties on Allied forces, but they couldn't sustain operations. Fuel shortages, limited movement, ammunition shortages, limited fire support, replacement shortages meant destroyed tanks stayed destroyed. American forces, suffering comparable or higher casualties, maintained offensive pressure because their logistics kept units supplied and reinforced. The Falaise pocket in August 1944 illustrated this perfectly. German forces retreating from Normandy attempted to withdraw through a narrow gap near Falaise. Allied forces attacked from multiple directions, attempting to close the pocket and trap German armies. Many German units escaped, but they abandoned almost all their heavy equipment. Over 500 tanks, thousands of vehicles, artillery pieces, everything requiring fuel. German soldiers walked out of the pocket. Equipment was left behind because fuel couldn't reach it and recovery vehicles couldn't tow it. The loss wasn't primarily combat casualties, it was logistics collapse. American logistics operations received less attention than combat operations, but were equally impressive militarily. The scale was unprecedented. By September 1944, Allied forces in Europe numbered over 3 million men. Supporting them required moving over 40,000 tons of supplies daily from ships to forward units. This required ports, trucks, railroads, depots, maintenance facilities, distribution networks, all coordinated continuously. American logistics officers designed and operated systems that sustained this flow despite German attacks, weather disruptions, infrastructure damage, everything that could go wrong. Consider ammunition. American artillery in Europe fired over 10 million rounds per month in heavy fighting. Each round required manufacturing, transport from United States to Europe by ship, offloading at ports, movement to ammunition dumps, distribution to artillery battalions, final delivery to gun positions. The entire process, from factory in Pennsylvania to howitzer in Belgium, required coordination across dozens of organizations and thousands of personnel. American logistics made it routine. German logistics couldn't match this, not even close. German ammunition production in late 1944 was perhaps 20% of American production. German transport capacity, crippled by Allied bombing and fuel shortages, couldn't distribute what little was produced. German artillery battalions in defensive positions often received ammunition allocations of 10 rounds per gun per day. American artillery fired 10 rounds per gun as preparatory bombardment before attacks began. The disparity in fire support capabilities followed directly from logistics disparity. German tank maintenance illustrated the same pattern. When a German tank broke down, repair depended on availability of spare parts, tools, trained mechanics, time to complete repairs without enemy interference. By late 1944, spare parts were scarce. German factories couldn't produce enough. Distribution systems couldn't deliver them forward. Many German tanks sat immobilized awaiting parts that never arrived. Even when parts existed, mechanics lacked tools or time to install them under combat conditions. Tank recovery vehicles, essential for evacuating damaged tanks to rear area repair facilities, were insufficient in number and often lacked fuel to operate. American tank maintenance worked systematically. Each American armored division included a maintenance battalion with mobile repair facilities, spare parts stocks, trained technicians, recovery vehicles. When a Sherman broke down, recovery vehicles towed it to battalion maintenance. If repairs could be completed within 24 hours, the tank returned to combat. If repairs required more time, the tank went to division maintenance or rear area depots, while the crew received a replacement tank. The crew might operate 3 different tanks in a month, but they were always equipped. The system treated tanks as interchangeable. Individual vehicles didn't matter. Maintaining unit combat strength mattered. This approach shocked German tankers who developed personal attachments to their vehicles. German tank crews named their tanks, maintained them carefully, fought in the same vehicle for months. When that tank was destroyed, crews often had to wait weeks for replacement. The contrast revealed different logistics philosophies. Germany treated tanks as precious assets to be preserved. America treated tanks as consumable resources to be used and replaced. In sustained warfare, the American approach worked better. The same pattern extended to personnel replacement. German replacement systems by 1944 were breaking down. Training time decreased as demand for replacements increased. New soldiers arrived at frontline units with minimal preparation. Often, they had never thrown a live hand grenade or fired at moving targets. They were rushed through abbreviated training and sent forward to fill gaps. These inadequately trained replacements suffered higher casualties, creating more demand for replacements, accelerating the downward cycle. American replacement systems maintained training standards better. Induction centers processed recruits through standardized training programs. Basic infantry training lasted 17 weeks. Specialized training for tankers, artillery, engineers required additional months. Replacements, arriving at combat units, had completed full training cycles. They weren't combat veterans, but they were prepared soldiers. The system could sustain this because American industrial capacity wasn't strained equipping armies. Factories produced enough weapons to arm both combat soldiers and trainees. Germany couldn't afford that luxury. German factories prioritized frontline equipment. Training units made do with obsolete or captured weapons. The cumulative effect of these logistics differences was overwhelming. By January 1945, American forces outnumbered German forces in the West by approximately 3-1, but effective combat power disparity was larger. American units operated at or near full strength, fully equipped, supplied continuously. German units operated at 50 to 70% of authorized strength, missing equipment, receiving irregular supplies. An American infantry division with 15,000 men, full complement of vehicles, adequate ammunition and food was far more combat effective than a German division with 10,000 men, insufficient vehicles, ammunition rationing. German commanders recognized this. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, defending the Ruhr region in early 1945, submitted reports to Hitler describing the situation in stark terms. German forces were disintegrating, not from lack of fighting spirit, from lack of means to fight. Ammunition was exhausted, fuel was gone, food stocks were critical, units couldn't maneuver because vehicles had no fuel, artillery couldn't fire because shells weren't available. Model requested either massive resupply or authorization to surrender. Hitler refused both. The battle continued pointlessly until Model's forces were encircled and destroyed. The Ruhr Pocket Campaign in April 1945 demonstrated American logistics at its most efficient. Over 325,000 German soldiers were encircled in a pocket roughly 100 kilometers across. American forces surrounded them, then systematically reduced the pocket. The operation required sustaining multiple corps, conducting continuous attacks while preventing German breakout attempts. American logistics supported this without strain. Ammunition flowed forward continuously. Casualties were evacuated and replaced. Fuel supplies never interrupted operations. The entire campaign, from encirclement to surrender, lasted 18 days. 18 days of sustained high-intensity operations supported flawlessly by logistics. German forces, trapped in the pocket, experienced the opposite. Cut off from supply lines, they consumed remaining stocks within days. Fuel ran out first. Vehicles were abandoned. Artillery ceased firing. Then, ammunition exhausted. Infantry units ran out of small arms ammunition and surrendered. Finally, food ran out. Over 300,000 men surrendered. The largest German capitulation in the West, not because American combat forces were overwhelming, because German logistics couldn't sustain the garrison. Otto Carius fought in the Ruhr pocket with his Jagdtiger company. His memoir describes the final weeks. German units scavenged constantly, searching for fuel, ammunition, food, anything usable. They captured American positions primarily to take supplies. Carius noted the absurdity. German soldiers riding American jeeps, eating American rations, fighting a war they knew was lost. The material disparity was complete and visible. Americans had everything. Germans had nothing. Combat continued because orders required it, but the outcome was predetermined by logistics. This psychological recognition, this understanding that logistics determined outcomes more than tactics or courage, was perhaps the most significant German fear. It undermined military culture's fundamental assumption. German military tradition, from Frederick the Great through Moltke to Guderian, emphasized that superior training, tactics, and fighting spirit could overcome material disadvantages. This belief had historical validation. Prussia won wars despite being smaller and poorer than enemies, but against American logistics in 1944 and 45, the belief collapsed. German soldiers continued fighting skillfully. Individual battles were often German tactical victories, but tactical victories couldn't change strategic reality. America produced more, transported more, supplied more than Germany could match, and American logistics systems, built deliberately over years, operated efficiently under pressure. The system wasn't perfect. Supply shortages occurred. Distribution problems caused temporary crises, but the system was robust enough to sustain armies across oceans, across continents, through months of continuous combat. German logistics had been adequate for short campaigns. Poland took 4 weeks. France took 6 weeks. Yugoslavia took 11 days. These campaigns ended before logistics became decisive. Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, was designed to finish in 3 months before Russian winter and before supply lines stretched beyond capacity. When Barbarossa didn't finish quickly, German logistics couldn't sustain the extended campaign. From December 1941 onward, Germany fought defensively or conducted limited offensives, always constrained by logistics. American entry into the war changed calculations completely. America brought industrial capacity that exceeded all Axis powers combined. American strategic planning assumed multi-year global war. American logistics systems were designed for that scale. From 1942 through 1945, American production and distribution systems improved continuously. By war's end, American logistics operated with mechanical efficiency that German planners studied with professional admiration and personal despair. This, ultimately, was what German tankers feared. Not individual Sherman tanks, which they could destroy, not individual American soldiers whom they could defeat tactically. They feared the system, the endless supply system, the replacement system that made every destroyed tank and every casualty temporary and recoverable. They feared fighting an enemy who treated warfare as an industrial process, with America's industrial base behind it. No amount of tactical skill could defeat that. Germany learned this through 3 years of attrition on the Eastern Front against Soviet logistics supported by American Lend-Lease. They learned it again in 1 year on the Western Front against American logistics directly. The irony was perfect and tragic. Germany had pioneered mechanized warfare. German doctrine emphasized speed, firepower, combined arms integration. German panzer divisions were the finest mechanized forces in the world in 1939 and 1940, but Germany never built the logistics systems to sustain those forces in extended warfare. German mechanization was tactical, not strategic. Panzer divisions could move quickly, but supply columns couldn't keep pace. Germany fought mechanized battles with partially mechanized logistics, supplemented by millions of horses. America mechanized everything, not just combat units, but logistics. Trucks moved supplies, specialized vehicles handled recovery, maintenance, transport. Everything was motorized, standardized, designed for mass production and field sustainability. American logistics wasn't glamorous. It didn't win dramatic tactical victories, but it enabled every American victory by ensuring forces could sustain operations regardless of casualties, distance, or duration. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.